he shall follow his lord's orders. He thinks Eric's abilities could be more useful and rarer than magic or swordsmanship. Then he told everyone not to look at the price tag and choose what fits them best. He knows that even if they have talent, if they aren't nurtured, they are useless. So they will start training outside their military bases and receive tailored education. Also, what they wear needs to fit their new environment. Hours later, they had open mouths when they saw the place. They asked him if it was where they were going to stay. He replied that it was where they would stay, and the butlers and servants were already employed. So from now on, they don't need to focus on anything but their education. While he was sending money, he told them that apart from the down payment, he would pay them right now in advance. Then he explained to them that their monthly salary is 20 million loots, and their annual salary is 240 million loots. Regardless of their past status, the terms of their contracts are all the same. Then they all told him that they would try their absolute best to exceed his expectations. He told them that if they proved that his instincts weren't wrong, obviously, their pay would increase. He understood if their development was slow, even if they gave it their all, so they should work hard to avoid disappointing him. He also told them not to make him uncomfortable by fussing or arguing, to which they all agreed. Then he told them that if someone offered a bribe to betray him, they shouldn't hesitate to tell him. If they did, he would give them twice the amount that was offered. This made them shocked and confused. He planned that from then on, that residence would be full of people recruited by him. He knew that it was his job to make it a place where their talents would prosper. Also, it may seem like wasting money, but for him, it was an investment. Investment in obtaining quality human resources. Later, he was walking in the street with Arsha while thinking that when he confronts Cedric, he'll need a place to keep his mother safe, kind of like a safety jail, making him wonder if he should look for one before returning to the unit. But then he peeked behind him and saw someone spying on him. Arsha caught and grabbed the man's neck. Then he cheerfully said hello to the man. A few days ago, he didn't know if people found out that he was collecting what he called ordinary people, but Cedric called him directly and said that he needed to mingle with people like him. He thinks that the dumb bastard Cedric was basically admitting that he was watching his every move while the man asked him, "What is it?" But he just asked the man how he found him there and told him that it seemed like he teleported from the royal palace without an escort. He grabbed the knife from the man's waist, while telling the man that he was pretty sure he had him detached. But the man told him that he didn't know what he was saying. He looked at Arsha while telling the man that he knew that he was the rat that Cedric planted. Then Arsha slammed the man hard on the ground while he was asking him if he wanted to die or answer his questions. The man shook in fear when he realized that increasing his aura was doing nothing and wondered if Arsha was an aura expert. But then the man figured out that she was not just any woman, and if he didn't talk, he'd die. So he told him that he'd say anything. A few minutes later, he told the man that he got it and that he found where he was by using Cedric's rat at the teleporting office. He tapped his sword to the man's neck and guessed that Berthaud is telling the truth because of his fear, confusion, and understanding condition. It made him wonder if he should say some lies to scare them. Then he told Berthaud that he already knew about how Cedric was finding information about him, but there was something interesting. He pulled away his knife while he was telling him that he was just listening to Cedric's orders and not really opposing him. So, he felt like he was just reluctantly finding information. Berthaud fearfully looked at Arsha and asked him if he is already ready to go against his master Cedric. Berthaud was about to ask him how he knew it, but he pointed his knife at Berthaud's head and told him that it was enough. Then asked if he wanted to live, to which Berthaud replied, yes. He told Berthaud that he should be on his side. Then he pierced the tip of his knife into Berthaud's forehead while telling him that he doesn't really order anything difficult. He should just give him an update every day. So, he should say that he was just doing what he normally does and report that there is nothing special about him. Then he asked Berthaud if he understood, to which Berthaud fearfully replied, yes. Later, in Lord Lawrence's castle, Cedric shouted and asked if Metz was in jail for spying. The man replied, yes, and then explained that unfortunately, Metz was caught in Adrian's room, causing many problems that made Cedric angry. He thought it happened because he had ignored his father's orders not to spy on Adrian. He had to get scolded by his father, who had been trying to figure out what was happening after the war. Cedric told his spy that he didn't want to do it, but he didn't have a choice. Then he ordered Berthaud to keep a close eye on Adrian until his father's anger subsided. Berthaud replied, yes, without knowing that Adrian was listening to everything. Adrian smiled, knowing that Cedric's remaining spies had been punished and imprisoned, just like in Dalton's case. He told Arsha that conveying his lordship wouldn't be easy. The talent gathering went smoothly, and Cedric recruited 20 people with innate special talents. Eric and Elijah, the former administrator of allies and the half-elf, would take care of the gifted academy without any problems. Cedric knew that everyone was working hard, so he couldn't just sit around. He entered the game and saw that he was level 159. He excitedly said that if he leveled up one more time, he could become a 6th circle wizard. However, he was shocked when a system warning popped up, telling him that an emergency had occurred, and their division commander had issued an emergency order. He logged out, knowing that his current location was on the front lines, and he realized that if something had happened there, it would be a huge problem. He came out of his room and asked Miller panicky what had happened. Miller told him that the Croissant Empire's sky fortress had crossed the border, and they were currently trying to gather details, making him wonder if everything had been calm before the storm. They all gathered in the meeting room, and Otis told them that once the local forces had been ordered to stand by, they should put the troops on the Leviathan train so they could be dispatched at any time. For some time, all their resting and eating would be done inside the train. He was worried that Otis clocked out earlier, but was relieved that he was there. Then Otis told them that from that moment on, spatial coordinate interference had begun across the entire front line bordering the Croissant Empire. They should not even think about teleporting because it was just suicide. While he was thinking that if Otis wasn't there, they would have had to plan all that without a commander, but it was a good thing that the Croissants attacked during the day. Then Otis looked at him while saying that from now on, he'll cut off all personal communication between troops except for colonel and above ranks, so they should only use a radio to communicate. He told him not to think that he was an exception, so he should be careful. He smiled, knowing that the warning was directed toward him. But he told Otis in his brain that he won't stop him from playing games. Then Otis shouted that it was a war, so everyone should be ready at all times, and they all replied yes. He stood up in silence, knowing that it was truly the war, but a moment later, the system showed him that he has reached level 160 and have subjugated the named monster, Tazit the twin-head ogre. He looked at the fading ogre while wondering if it's how he hit the sixth circle and thinks that it was worth playing his game. Then he remembers Harmon asking him if he's really playing a game and told him that if he gets caught playing a game while everyone else is banned from using their devices, but he just told Harmon that he gets it and ordered him to command the unit. He feels bad for Harmon, but he knows that it is more important to him. Then the system shows that he has received 10 trillion loot and orients him that the money he receives will be kept in the Elysia Union Bank. Then he hears something on his side and saw a huge eagle while the system shows him that he has received the sub-supporter supersonic black eagle. He knows that there shouldn't be a sub-supporter in that game, but there is the combat support eagle that an archer could have, and there is not enough information to look at. Then he logged out, thinking that he might be better and more accurate at finding information in reality than in the game system. But when he sat up, there was nothing there, so he went outside, guessing that maybe it was outside. He walks outside to look around and thinks that a big black eagle will appear, like Arsha did that time, and it would cause chaos. Then he searches their surroundings when Arsha notices something and points in the sky while telling him that it is there. It flew down, making the knights panic and worriedly tell him to dodge, but when it flapped its wings, the knights were thrown away, leaving him and Arsha standing still. It glared at him, making him stunned in surprise, then it bowed to him respectfully. The knight was about to attack it, but he raised his hand to stop them and saw that it was a chimera that had the bones and leather of a black dragon. It has a body that was not easily damaged, even by an aura blade, with a very high recovery rate, and its basic option is a suicide dive. But he noticed that it only had one skill, which is the shared vision. He patted its head, thinking that just like how Arsha gets stronger with him, he needs to know how and under what conditions it needs to get extra skills. He thinks that the condition is likely to clear a quest. He was not sure how the suicide dive was helpful, but he knew that shared vision could be helpful because it's like getting information at the speed of sound. One of the knights worriedly called him, making him shock and asks him what it was, making him realize that he was so focused on the black eagle that he didn't notice people gathering. He cleared his throat, guessing that it can't be helped, then he extended his hand and asked the eagle if it wants to go with him. It gently put its beak on his hand to agree, and then he hugged it gently, which it accepted, making the knights confusedly ask why it wasn't attacking and if it looked like they were sharing their affection. On the other hand, he shyly wonders why he even does that really cringe acting and feels like it's going to bite him back later. After the war started, the war situation did not lead to tedious regional small-scale wars but expanded to the entire western border, which was an all-out war. Thanks to it, his brigade is making a debut, and the communication network is cut off so he can't log onto his game. Suddenly, one of the knights reports to him that the Croissant Empire's platoon of vanguards is approaching. But he tells the knight not to panic and fall back to reform formations. Then tells Billiam to lead the vanguards, to which the knight replies yes. He calmly drinks his tea, thinking that even though it is just a game, but after fighting the monsters, it feels like he can't die that easily while Harmon is looking at him. He asked Harmon what it was, and Harmon replied it was nothing. but when he looked back at the screen again, he was shocked to see that the enemy vanguards were going to attack, so he immediately ordered the 2nd Battalion to deploy the energy shield. Then the battalions immediately deployed the energy shield as per his order. Then the enemy launched an attack toward the shield, and when it hit their shield, it made a loud explosion, making them inside move to their positions. He was shocked that an attack from that far away was unbelievably strong and noticed that it wasn't just a test. Also, he knows that if there is no 7th circle magician or higher, it is pretty obvious who is going to win in a fight. Then he asked the knights about the situation. The knight replied that the 2nd Battalion's energy shield was down and needed 90 seconds to recharge. He believed that the energy shield, meant to protect everyone, got destroyed in a single attack from the enemy vanguards. He mentioned this to Archduke Lucas, regretting not providing them with magic equipment. However, he knew there was no need to envy the vanguards, for if he reached the maximum level in his game, he'd be at the 9th circle and hold the title of Grand Master at the 8th circle, known as Arsha. Harmon told him they had dodged a bullet, and if it weren't for him, they would have been in trouble. He humbly attributed it to his good luck. Glancing at his monitor again, he noticed that the enemy's attack force size wasn't significantly different from theirs. The real issue was the size of their fortress, which was small. He knew that the Croatian Empire had 2 sky fortresses, but they were considerably smaller than theirs, likely mass-produced for invasion. Harmon mentioned that, unless they had missed some information, it was the enemy's first time deploying them. In this war, vanguards were on the ground, and there were fortified fortresses in the sky. The ground was at a complete stalemate, and it seemed the variables lay elsewhere. As he watched the surveillance, he commented that it was intense. Then he saw the system indicating the enemy's weapon detachment in progress, and their bridge. Suddenly, their enemy's fortress collapsed, leaving them puzzled. Something had fallen, and their machines attacked the falling objects. Inside the fortress, the knights laughed, thinking their enemy's fortress had been destroyed. However, he was shocked to see it overloading with magical power, leaving him confused. Suddenly, he realized something and urgently ordered them to send a message to the fortress. Shouting, he warned them of an imminent suicide attack. Then a piece of the enemy fortress landed on theirs, causing a massive explosion. Before the explosion, in the Sky Fortress, the army was panicking upon hearing about a suicide bombing. The captain ordered everyone to quickly initiate a retreat, fire anti-aircraft rounds, and retrieve all personal firearms. However, Adrian noticed that it was going to crash, so he immediately used his great shield power to protect their fortress. When the enemy attacked and hit the shield he created, their fortress remained safe. Although their fortress was safe, Adrian felt sick due to the incredible shockwave. He knew that if he hadn't used the artifacts in time, they all would have been blown away. He looked up, wondering about their sky fortress, and felt relieved that it hadn't crashed because they had retreated quickly. He also realized that if their allied forces' sky fortress had crashed, the remaining forces from the enemy's sky fortress would have massacred them. He then ordered the army to check the status of the vanguards and take care of the soldiers, to which they replied that they understood. A moment later, Otis happily praised him and thanked him for his hard work. Otis told Adrian that his performance was excellent that day. Adrian replied that Otis flattered him, but Otis asked him what flatter meant. Adrian explained that he meant Otis was giving him praise. Otis then told him that if Adrian hadn't noticed the self-destruction, the damages would have been astronomical. Suicide bombing attacks were attempted on other battlefields at the same time, but their unit was the only place that noticed the abnormality beforehand and successfully guarded the fortress. Otis also informed Adrian that he had told the local commander that today's victory was thanks to him, so he would receive a decent reward. Adrian thanked Otis, and Otis humbly told him that it was the superior's duty to ensure that their subordinates receive appropriate recognition when they make a contribution. Adrian smiled, wondering why Earl Otis was surprisingly reasonable. Then, Otis mentioned that there were some strange rumors going around about Adrian. Adrian asked what rumors Otis was referring to. Otis replied that he heard Adrian had tamed a mysterious giant eagle. Adrian confirmed this and said that the way he communicated with the Black Eagle was truly mysterious. He added that he didn't know about the communicating part but found the eagle fascinating. Otis happily patted his shoulder and said that communicating was alright, as animals understanding them would be quite a wonder. Another man chimed in, saying that if it's a large black eagle, it's probably a species called Altair from the holy city Everahil. They are rare birds born with a high level of mana and are said to be able to fly for 5 kilometers at a time. Adrian replied that he didn't know about it but secretly knew it to be true. The man proudly told them that it is said that once tamed, they will never betray their master and will not hesitate to risk their lives to protect them, making him act amazed and glad that Archmage Lucas made it based on a real-life species. Because if he had given him a flashy sub-supporter for no reason, people would have annoyed him, asking what it was, so it wouldn't have been easy to manage. Otis happily shouted that if that is so, the black eagle is no different from a dog and called it a dog eagle, making everyone in the room laugh. He asked Otis if he could use the personal communication that their enemy had now retreated, and Otis agreed, telling him that he should consider it his reward. This made him brighten up, and he thanked Otis so much because he can finally access Chronicles online, and there's no way he'd miss a chance to level up. 2 weeks after the start of the war, someone called Billiam, who was in the suit, told him that he doubted they would show themselves while climbing down the mountains with lots of surveillance. It could be a trap, so they shouldn't stay too close and should start fighting at a distance. To this, he replied that they would do as he said. Billiam thinks no one would have listened to Adrian in the past. Then he asked his comrade if they heard it and told them not to blindly trust visible signals from the radar and follow Adrian's instructions, then move while keeping their distance, to which the army together replied yes, making Billiam notice that everyone has changed a lot in just 2 weeks. Later, the enemy surrounded them, and Billiam told everyone that it was a trap. Then he ordered them to retreat while keeping their enemy in check. He didn't expect that they would come from underground, which is the radar's only blind spot. But he was glad they listened to their brigadier, which is Adrian's warning, and stayed on their guard because if they had approached without a plan, they would have been wiped out in an instant. Then he looked around and saw his comrades struggling because they were outnumbered. He thinks it was fortunate that they avoided total annihilation. But their situation isn't looking good, and they have to wait for support while blocking attacks from the vanguards, which are twice as many as their allies. Also, he knows that it will take at least 5 minutes for reinforcements to arrive, but it was impossible to hold out without taking any damage. Suddenly, Adrian told him to push forward, making him shocked. But then they heard a loud explosion from behind. Then someone asked them if they were alright and reported to him that 10 vanguards, directly under the command of Division Commander Earl Otis, have arrived, making him wonder how they were already there and if Adrian knew that would happen and requested support in advance. But then Adrian asked him if he came out for a walk and why he wasn't attacking, then told him that the enemies are having their backs toward the mountain range, making him unable to believe that composed voice again and really doesn't know who it is that came out for a walk. But Adrian just told him that it was not easy to get reinforcements, so they should defeat at least 5 units while they are at it. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, one of the men asked if they heard that, under Adrian's command, they killed 5 enemy vanguards. Another man replied that Adrian is incredible. He not only predicted the surprise attack but also turned a crisis into an opportunity. What's more, while other units are suffering, Brigadier Adrian's unit is steadily making contributions. Otis thought it was a coincidence at first, but with the way things unfolded, it was no longer the case. Remember, they say Adrian, the prodigy of Viscount Lawrence, became an idiot after overcoming a near-death crisis from poison. But the truth is, Adrian was a sleeping dragon who had been hiding his power all this time. Then he asked the people in the room if Brigadier Adrian is a similar age to Michelle. He told them that if Adrian's family has given up on him, he'd like to bring Adrian in, which shocked the people in the room. One of them told him that he heard Brigadier Adrian already has a lover and brought her to the battlefield. Otis asked if that was a problem when all that matters is if Michelle can become Adrian's mistress. One of the men reminded him that Adrian is a game addict. Still, he told them that it's still better than being addicted to drugs, alcohol, and women. This made the people in the room notice that Otis had already chosen Adrian as his son-in-law, and Otis won't change his mind no matter what they say now. One of the men asked Otis if it isn't better to keep an eye on Adrian for a little while longer, and the other man agreed, telling him that considering Michelle's fiery personality, if she hears about it, they would all disappear. Otis said that Michelle does have a bit of a temper, which the room agreed with, so he told them to stop talking about Michelle and ordered them to send a performance report to the Corps Command. Also, be sure to include how great Brigadier Adrian's contribution was. Later, Billiam asked him if he had a moment. He tapped Arsh's shoulder and replied that he does, but unless it's something important, he should keep it short. He noticed that Billiam's demeanor changed from curiosity and vigilance to favorable anticipation, and he wondered if it was because he saved Billiam in battle. Billiam asked him why he's hiding his strength, making him unable to believe that Billiam is straightforward. Then Billiam told him that many of their vassals are worried about the future of the territory. If Cedric becomes a lord like him, there will surely be a crisis. So, he believes that Cedric does not have the qualification to be a lord. If he has any intention of competing with his brother, he would like to support him with all his might. He noticed that his magic glasses didn't show any change in Billiam's condition, which means Billiam isn't lying. He knows that Billiam is one of his father's closest aides, making him wonder if Billiam perhaps received some kind of instruction in advance, or is he acting like this simply because he was his benefactor. He told Billiam that he was thankful for his kind words, but he'll pretend he didn't hear it, leaving Billiam shocked and stunned. He tapped Billiam, whose condition changed to disappointment, noticing that Billiam is surprisingly naive, and he was too rash with his remarks because he knows that no matter how much they try to restrict the information going to Cedric, he can't act hastily when there may be more surveillance systems that he doesn't know about. He also knows that it's entirely his job to get rid of Anna and Cedric, so he has no intention of sharing that joy with others. Then he peeked back at Billiam, thinking that for now, he will keep in mind that there are people who are purely concerned about the well-being of the territory. Then he remembered that he heard before that he'd be awarded with a medal after what happened and wonders if it shouldn't be that big of a deal. The next day, someone told him that having made many contributions, the second son of the Lawrence family, Adrian, shall be bestowed with a second-class Golden Lion medal. Then the man called Calitz van Reinhardt, the 23rd king of the kingdom of Reinhardt, while a swarm of people were cheering for him, making him know that every piece of Vanguard's equipment is worth as much as a fighter jet. But he didn't expect what he did would be so highly regarded. He thinks Otis must have chosen him to be the figurehead to accelerate the progress of the war, and told the man that it was his greatest honor and he will cherish it for the rest of his life. Then he tried to smile confidently while the reporter and people captured them, making him sure that Cedric will probably go crazy if Cedric sees it. Meanwhile, in the mansion of the Lawrence family, Cedric slammed his fist on the table in anger and shouted that everyone is talking about that bastard Adrian, and if he had participated in the war, all those merits would have been his. Then he asked Anna what about his father, and Anna replied that his father is staying with that lowly woman. Cedric told her that Rayford seems to be spending more and more time with that woman these days and asked her why isn't she doing anything. But she frustratingly asked him back if she should poison Rayford too, making Cedric call his mother shoutingly. Anna told him not to raise his voice and that Adrian is the reason his father is with that woman. So, she thinks his father is determined to protect that woman while Adrian is away on the battlefield from him and her. He asked her if it was true that Adrian will completely cut off his ties with their family after returning from the war, and she agreed, telling him that it was the reason why Adrian must be desperate too, since Adrian needs to find a way to make a living by himself. It must be why Adrian has thought of the war as a great opportunity, because if Adrian makes a big contribution, Adrian may be able to receive a title. But still, Adrian isn't even his competitor, and she told him that his mother will make sure of it, making him think that everything is as his mother says, knowing that behind them is their maternal grandfather, and most of the Lawrence Viscounty is under his mother's control, so his father is merely a proxy who momentarily rules over that land until he hands it over to him, making him wonder why and remember looking at Adrian when they were young. But Adrian is the only one getting praises, leaving him behind in the dark. He heard people saying that Adrian was a prodigy, making him pissed in annoyance, and thinks that Adrian has definitely been reduced to a good-for-nothing bastard after they attempted to poison him, making him wonder how Adrian keeps getting on his nerves. And he shouted Adrian's name, who was busy waving his hand at the crowd of people. 7th week, 48 days since the war started. He happily told the vanguards to have an energy drink before they go out and poured a drink one by one. Then he heard one of the vanguards tell another man that he felt really refreshed after drinking it, and the man agreed, saying that other brigades had become sluggish as the war dragged on, but their brigade was still lively. This made him think about how precious that energy drink was, even though it was just a diluted elixir containing a single drop of that legendary medicine. He felt it was a bit of a waste, but he had to do it for the war to end quickly. Billiam told him that they would go scouting, and he told Billiam not to push themselves too hard. But then one of the vanguards called him and said that the division commander was looking for him, which made him wonder why again. Before leaving, he gave something to the Black Eagle, and it immediately flew away. He tiredly told Harmon that Otis had been summoning him more frequently these days. Harmon laughingly told him that it must mean Otis trusts him a lot and asked if that wasn't good. He remained silent, knowing that even though it was bothersome to be summoned by a great aristocrat, there was nothing he could do. A moment later, he was looking in front of him in confusion because he saw that the other unit commanders were also there. He wondered if Otis had summoned all the high-ranking commanders in the division. He thought that if it was related to the battle, Otis could have sent him a message instead, making him wonder if Otis had something important to announce that couldn't be made public. Then Otis appeared and warmly welcomed all his guests. Otis told them to rejoice because they wouldn't have to hear that sickening gunfire anymore since the end of the war would be declared soon, which surprised him. Otis told them that the end of the war would be declared soon, and the foreign ministers of both countries were currently holding a meeting. It seemed that those Croatian guys had no intention of going to an all-out war in the first place. It was a large-scale conflict, but in the end, it was a local war that was no different from an annual event, making everyone in the room sigh with relief. One man wondered why they would do such a thing, and the other man replied that it was obviously to strengthen their imperial power. He remembered that it was the same in his past life, and he guessed his nation just didn't have any luck when it came to its relationships with neighboring countries. Then, he asked Otis about the vanguards who have been dispatched. Otis replied that until the declaration of the end of the war is given, they must continue that war game, making him upset to hear it because he knows that it was always the subordinates who die due to their superiors' decisions. But then, Otis told him to relax and asked him if he didn't receive a golden lion medal as the spoils of war. Then, he told him that his reward certainly won't be small if the war ends like this, so he should just savor that moment now. It made him smile, thinking that Otis was right, and he wonders since when has he been so virtuous. Then he cheered his drinks to Otis, thinking that instead of worrying about others, he should focus on his future. Since he has to go back to his family after the war ends, he needs to level up even more. The next day, Billiam told him that he still thinks it was a good thing, making him silent while Arsha is eating on the side. Billiam asked him what would happen if their country and the Croissant Empire engaged in an all-out war. He told him that 100 sky fortresses and tens of thousands of vanguards would have annihilated everything, and an unimaginable catastrophe would have taken place. He told Billiam that he should have taken some more rest and asked him why he came there. Then he opened his arms to Arsha and gave a cookie to Billiam, telling him to have some of it. Billiam asked him what it was, and he replied that considering it was given by Count Otis, it should be quite precious. Billiam told him that he already felt that before, but he was truly different from other nobles. Not only did he feel truly sorry for the sacrifice of his soldiers, but he would even keep guard of the command center like it, while his men are resting. But he knows that, of course, he would be different from the common noble since he was a very ordinary citizen in his past life and he was there to wait until he can access the game. But then Billiam told him that at the same time, he still possesses the composure and dignity of a true noble. He told Billiam that he thinks he got that part wrong, but Billiam just asked him if he wasn't drinking black tea even when he saw enemy troops rushing in, and he thinks that is impossible without absolute trust in himself. They, the subordinates, were able to shake off the tension as they saw his composure. Also, everyone in the 232nd Independence Brigade completely trusts him. He knows what Billiam is trying to say now, and Billiam is trying to bring up again that he'll support him to be the successor. And there he was wondering why Billiam complimented him all of a sudden. When he was about to remind Billiam of what he said last time, Billiam suddenly kneeled down, making him surprised. But Billiam just told him that he has got trustworthy men around them so that no one can come close, and they have also checked for surveillance devices, so he doesn't have to worry. He looked up hearing Billiam's words and noticed that outside were vanguards guarding him, making him realize that Billiam is serious because all of them are from his father's side. He told Billiam that he knows that he has taken precautions, but that kind of behavior may be more noticeable. Billiam told him that it was exactly why they came there when everyone is resting. He, who was a lowly subject, Gilbert Billiam, would like to serve him, Adrian Lawrence, the second young master of the Lawrence family, as his lord from today on. He asked Billiam if it could be that the other knights outside are thinking of doing the same thing, to which Billiam replied, yes, making him silent. Then he replied, all right, making Billiam look up at him in excitement. However, he told Billiam that he has a condition, and Billiam asked him what it was. He told him that he is to act normally until he tells him otherwise. Billiam asked him if it wouldn't be better to gather power as quickly as possible and suggested that even if he built up his power there right now, the size of their forces would be nothing to scoff at. He replied that it would be nothing to scoff at but not enough for them to win, and he had a plan, so they should follow his orders. Billiam bowed and replied that he will. He asked Billiam how many knights are willing to follow him like he, and Billiam replied that first of all, there are 5 vanguards there, and the remaining knights number around 30. So, if they gather the people from the territory, their size will at least be doubled, making him think that it was not bad, and there were more people for him to work with. Then he slowly stood up while praising Billiam. However, before he left, Billiam told him that he had one more thing to tell him, making him confused. Billiam told him that his father is planning to assign Sir Perseus to him, and he thinks it would be a good idea to recruit him in advance. This surprised him, knowing that Perseus was originally the vice commander of the Knight Order of Lawrence, and with his superior skills, he had virtually no rivals among all the aura experts, with the only exception being the Knight Commander. However, he thought Perseus had already left the order due to family political fights centered around Anna, making him wonder if that kind of person is really coming back. Billiam told him that maybe when Perseus returns, many knights who have been remaining neutral will change their minds. He knows that Perseus was a typical warrior and a very popular knight. In other words, there is room for power expansion through him, perhaps enough to be on par with Anna and Cedric's forces. So, he thinks recruiting Perseus was not a bad idea at all, especially when it comes to a valuable talent that he can use outside of the family. Then he told Billiam that he thinks he needs to meet Perseus as soon as possible and asked Billiam if he could arrange it secretly. This made Billiam shocked, and he promised to look into it. He came out of the room, thinking that soon, power is good. However, his top priority is not to build his own power, but rather to clear the next lucky encounter quest, and swore that he was going to form his 7th circle today. But he was swimming in his blood with Arsha and Black Eagle when the system showed him that he had died and he should try again after recovering his experience points. Before that situation happened, he was loudly asking what was happening. Then he called Arsha to help him, which Arsha immediately obeyed. All that time, while clearing lucky encounters and reaching level 200, he never experienced death. He knows that it's normal to die and overcome struggles in a game. But if he dies there while sharing senses with his real-world self, the pain will be unimaginable. He noticed that Arsha always stood still against any enemies, but she's being pushed back right now. He always put his safety first in every fight, but when Arsha and Black Eagle were slashed by his enemy, a Death Knight, everything collapsed. Then he noticed that it was not just an aura master, because the enemy also had a named boss quest buff and an abnormally strong body, which means that one is on a different level. The last thing he saw was the system showing him that he died, and he should try again when he recovers his experience points. Then the system showed him that he was being resurrected in a nearby village. He was sitting and enduring his pain. He thinks that the senses sharing system is problematic because he can't even twist in pain since people are everywhere, and he realized that it was too easy until now. Then he used his resurrection scroll, and the system showed him that his support, Arsha, had been revived. Arsha apologized to him, but he just asked her if she was okay and if it didn't hurt her. She replied that it did, but her senses in the game are far lower than his, so she can hold it in. He sighed in relief and thanked goodness that she was not badly hurt. Then he remembered that he recruited her without thinking because of her tanking stats, but as he got closer to her, he was embarrassed hiding behind her small body. So, he swore that he would try to change his combat style and thinks that if she was enduring his pain. But then he told himself that he would have to change it in the end. He realized that fighting the Death Knight showed him a clear limit to their combat style. Arsha blocks the enemy's movement, and Crowy, his Black Eagle, blocks their sight or sneak attack to support Arsha, and he does massive damage from the back with magic. It worked out since they are overgeared, but it has a limit against enemies like Death Knights who can constantly keep up with Arsha. The problem is the long time between each attack. His casting time is delaying the main damage, which means the only way to keep away enemies between casts is Black Eagle's tackle. He looked at Arsha, knowing that her defense worked against the Death Knight, and she ended up overpowered by him. But she can surely block one attack, and if there was one more DPS that could support her while he cast, their current combat style would work. But he knows that he can't drag someone else into the lucky encounter quest, so the only solutions he can think of now are 3. One way is to use low-level magic circles to reduce casting time and increase your firing rate. 2 is to use Crowy as a fighter instead of just as hit-and-run support. 3 is for Arsha to stop using only a shield and start using a sword to deal damage. Then, he realized that the first option was weakening himself, so it was best to change things with Arsha and Crowy. He planned to look closely into it while recovering his experience points. He told her that it wouldn't be easy, but they should give it a try. Arsha agreed. However, in the second battle against the Death Knight Pascal, the system showed him that he died and needed to recover his experience points to try again. This made him frustrated, and he asked how it was even possible. He resurrected Arsha once again, and she apologized to him. He told her not to apologize because it was his problem. This time, he tried using Arsha and Black Eagle more actively in the fight, but Crowy had a hard time facing the Death Knight directly and died within a minute after the fight started. He died within 3 minutes, and Arsha followed after a minute. He thought the biggest problem in that fight was probably Crowy dying too quickly. Crowy couldn't deal much damage to the target, but the diversion helped. This means that to maintain their combat style, Crowy's survival is necessary. He wondered if he should make and equip Crowy with a chest plate. Then he thought he would have to try something and reassured himself that there was no need to be nervous because things that are not working will eventually work. Also, it was just a test to reach the 7th circle. Still, in the 3rd battle, he died, which made him punch the wall continuously in anger. He said it wasn't too bad, it was made in a hurry, but it did its job. It allowed them to fight the Death Knight Pascal longer, which allowed them to see his pattern. He told her that they started to see Pascal's patterns, which was good, so they should try again after recovering their experience points. She agreed. In the 5th battle, Pascal couldn't believe them and asked if he was fighting against a bunch of acrobats. Pascal told them that it was real talent to be able to amuse an undead like him and asked why he didn't change his approach. He just told Pascal that he must be confused and asked if he had heard about the human bomber. Then Crowy lifted him up and he attacked Pascal using his magic, and he also shouts at Pascal to die while continuously attacking Pascal. Pascal blocked their attacks using his sword while Arsha was running toward him. He laughingly shouted that it was nice without noticing that Crowy was exhausted. Crowy slowly fell to the ground with him, making him confused. Then Crowy put him down in front of Pascal. He He told Pascal that it was nice to see him down there, and he fearfully greeted Pascal while Crowy collapsed on the ground, exhausted. Then Pascal killed him, and the system showed that he had died. In the 9th battle, he noticed that they tried different formations this time. Pascal asked him why a wizard was in the front line and told him that it was fun. But he noticed that this time the damage dealt went up by much more than last time. Casting magic while dodging Pascal's attacks was the biggest problem. But he managed to last 25 minutes, so he thinks it was possible. He planned to try again with items focused on their reflexes rather than casting and try to be an evasive wizard that no one wants to be. Then the system showed that he died once more. In the 10th battle, he was dodging while using his magic to attack. Pascal attacked him, but he avoided it. When Pascal went on a rampage, he managed to slip through his attacks. Then he used his magic power together with Arceus to attack Pascal. They hit Pascal, but when Pascal raised his sword and swung it at them, they were both thrown away, defeated. But he smiled, thinking that it was it, and that battle gave him assurance. He tried to be an evasive wizard, and it decreased his damage but allowed him to survive on his own, which allowed other members to attack freely, resulting in a 62-minute long battle and damage dealt to the Death Knight by 84%. So he knows that he can do it if he keeps trying. He took off the game device and noticed that he had exceeded the connection time limit. He stretched his body while telling Arsha that he thought it would be over after reaching level 200. But they were being held back at an unexpected place. But then he felt something on his shoulder and told Arsha that he felt like the world is moving slower and asked if he was sick. Arsha replied that he experienced and repeated death and resurrection many times, so she thinks it was normal for his sight to change. He asked her if she was the same as he, and she replied that she can't really tell, but she felt that she was stronger because her body strength is the same as yesterday, but she feels like she was way stronger than before. She told him that it was the strength that was only obtained through experience. He thinks he was used to it now, but Arsha's response was definitely not from an artificially created homunculus. If time passes, and she experiences much more, she will be no different from a human being. She asked him if he had any orders, and he replied no. Then he told her that he was going to sleep, so she should rest too, and they should try again when he can get back on, to which she replied yes. In their 12th battle, the damage dealt to the Death Knight is 75%. In their 13th battle, their damage dealt to the Death Knight is 85%. In their 14th battle, their damage dealt to the Death Knight is 91%. In their 15th battle, their damage dealt to the Death Knight is 89%. In the 16th battle, their damage dealt to the Death Knight is 93%. In their 17th battle, their damage dealt to the Death Knight is 98%. And in their 18th battle, their damage dealt to the Death Knight is 100%, which means they defeated Pascal. He smiled tiredly, raised both hands in the air because of excitement, and told his team that they had won. Then the system showed him that he completed the Lucky Encounter quest level 7. Then they entered the 8th floor of Manuel Lucas's magic tower, and he noticed that the 7th floor alone was several times larger than the previous floor, but that one is the size of the Royal Library. Then he asked if most of those decorations were made with game graphics because it was good. But then someone told him that they were all real, making him shocked. He immediately swung his staff toward that someone, wondering if the test to achieve the 7th circle is not over yet. But Arsha smilingly told him that it was fine, so he put down his staff, unable to believe that Arsha would smile like that. Then he looked at the man in the center of the magic circle and wondered if he was a fairy or a grandfather one. Then he wondered if he was a new supporter but was confused about why he looked so familiar. But then he figured out something and shouted to ask if he was Archduke Lucas. But the old man replied that his name is Chester and he was the manager of the Fate and also a trace of Manuel Lucas, making him confusedly wonder what he meant by the manager of Fate, and more than that, what he meant by trace. Chester explained it simply. He was an artificial intelligence created by replicating Manuel Lucas's memories, but he was focused on a trace of Archduke Lucas. He thinks that even if it was a clone, he encountered a being who is no different from his savior. Let alone be happy, his head is complicated, and it would be great if Chester showed favor to him. But if it's the opposite, it'll be hard for him to respond, since at least in the Hollywood system, he would be an omnipotent being, no less than a god. He sweated, wondering if Chester was not going to take back what he gave him. But Chester told him that there's no need to be that nervous. He told Chester that to think he'd be able to have an independent conversation like this. He doesn't seem like a program made with artificial intelligence at all. Chester replied, of course. Then he explained that he may not have a soul, but he does have data containing a person's life. He told Chester that although Lucas's body couldn't win against aging and died, at least his spirit remains in that virtual world. In a sense, it was eternal life. Chester told him that it can be seen that way, which is why Manuel Lucas created the Hollywood system in the first place. But that system isn't perfect because memories that were turned into data may be lost in the transfer or deteriorate. Also, more than anything, he can't see him as being alive because he just exists like a specter. Manuel Lucas thought that even if a clone memory had consciousness, it was not his true self. If he was interested in eternal life through memory duplication, Lucas wouldn't have wandered around in virtual space like this, but would create a homunculus like Garcia and engrave his memories there. He had a suspicion that Manuel Lucas's ultimate goal was to take over his body, but he was glad that it doesn't seem to be the case. He asked Chester if he may ask him why he appeared. Then, he told Chester that honestly, he was flustered by the difficult situation on the previous floor and he wondered if there would be any restrictions or compulsory duties given to him. Chester slid down his staff, and a system appeared in front of him, showing him that he is granted the usage of Hollywood System Administrator authority for 5 times. Chester told him that the fate that he acquired is Manuel Lucas's everything, so naturally, various authorities are included in it, and there are limitations as the fate hasn't been fully resolved yet, but he will be able to exercise his authority as he wishes in the future. He asked Chester what he can do with it, and Chester replied that he will be able to exercise administrator authority over all programs based in the Hollywood system, which is a virtual reality system, making him shocked because he knows that the Hollywood system only exists with features of virtual reality and is similar to Earth's internet. In other words, it means that he can control all the information connected online as he wants. But then Chester told him that, however, he must adhere to 4 rules when exercising administrator authority. First, administrator privileges cannot be used for Chronicle Online, which is bound with Lucas's fate. Second, he is prohibited from directly accessing another person's brain. Third, he is prohibited from stealing other people's property, and fourth, he was prohibited from exercising authority that directly has a negative impact on the world. He was wondering what it was since Chester said rules, but he realized that it was pretty logical. Then he asked Chester that by any chance, it was also possible to launder the source of wealth acquired through fate, and Chester replied that it was not difficult because there are a few methods, but what he recommends is to create investment and stock trading records in the online currency market. Then he asked Chester about the possibility of getting caught through investigation, and Chester replied that the probability of detection is extremely close to 0%. It was not just about manipulating the ledger, but it was about revising all the relevant information, and making it appear as if it was a completely real event based on the records. He told Chester that he'd like to use administrator authority, and Chester replied that he understood, then explained to him that the current assets held are 12.625 trillion loots, and his assets increased the moment he opened the treasure chest on the 8th floor of the Magic Tower. Then, he asked him if he would like him to organize it too, to which he replied yes. Then Chester asked him if he had any additional requests. He told Chester that Arsha needs a legitimate family registered, and while they were at it, it'd be better to put her as coming from the holy city Everhill. Chester told him that it was possible, and he shall make a family register that says all Arsha family members died, and she was currently an orphan, making him notice that Chester was no different from a genie from the magic lamp. He asked Chester if his role is to give him the administrator authority and help him process it, to which Chester replied, yes. Then he asked Chester why Archduke Lucas is going to that extent, and Chester replied that it was his way of expressing missing his hometown and consideration so that he doesn't live a bad life as he did. This made him wonder what Chester means by so he doesn't have to live a bad life like Lucas did, because those words don't suit someone who is called great. He knows that if Lucas isn't in that world, if Lucas isn't an earthling like him, and if Lucas didn't leave his fate for a future generation, his life would be more pathetic than now, and he wouldn't be as bright as now. So, bending on his knees, he thanked his master for everything. But Chester told him that he was not Manuel Lucas, but he noticed that the corner of Chester's mouth seemed to tremble slightly. But he wonders if he was mistaken. Then the system showed him that he had acquired 50 trillion loot and acquired Sky Fortress Icarus. Also, the 7th Circle has been created. Meanwhile, in Archduchy City of Nishan, the former vice captain of the Night Order, Pesius, asked the person if he said Adrian and if he heard it wrong. Billiam told him that he didn't hear it wrong, and they believe that if Adrian takes control of the territory, it will develop even further than it is now. Then he asked him if he didn't intend to support Adrian's move anyway, but he just asked Billiam back if he thinks they are the same thing. He thought he was standing up for the Lord, which is Rayford. But if he had known he was asking for a private talk to push for an immature child, he wouldn't have met him in the first place. But Billiam calmly told him that Adrian is gifted. He told Billiam that he did hear that Adrian was a bit impressive in the war, but asked Billiam if he thinks that the object of trust is too small to believe and act on just it. Billiam just laughed, making him confused. Billiam apologized to him and explained that he wasn't laughing at him, and that he just remembered that he was in a similar position to Adrian not long ago. It seems like he thinks Adrian got lucky with that one and is still the same as always. He asked Billiam if he meant that Adrian has changed, and Billiam replied that he certainly hasn't. Rather, what is known to the outside world is only the tip of the iceberg, and unlike him, who heard about Adrian's expertise through others, he was someone who heard Adrian's instructions directly and put them into action. Also, he dare say that Adrian is one of the greatest geniuses in that country, but he won't know unless he experiences it himself, and even the knights who lined up behind Cedric followed Adrian during the war. He told Billiam that he was completely devoted to the second young master, and Billiam replied that he had no other choice but to be devoted to Adrian. Then, he told him that he won't know unless he experiences it himself. He thinks that the story was that Adrian, who was a prodigy, took poison and became a boy of mediocrity at the age of 7. In other words, Adrian decided on a way to survive at a young age and put it into practice. Until recently, even if we set aside Adrian's intelligence, which Billiam boasts about, he has no choice but to acknowledge Adrian's patience and perseverance. Then, he asked Billiam what he wants, and Billiam replied that he wants to persuade the vassals who are maintaining neutrality and leaning power balance toward the second young master. He told Billiam that it was a huge task, but it was interesting. Billiam told him that he made a great decision, but he asked Billiam what he means when he hasn't decided yet and shouldn't he meet Adrian before making a decision. Billiam smilingly told him that Adrian said he was going to visit soon anyway, and he heard that Adrian is coming soon, so he should let him give Adrian a call, making him notice that everything was done according to Adrian's intentions. Billiam told Adrian, who was on the other line, that they were done talking now, and he thinks he can come in now. Perseus is thinking that a young master who has been living for revenge for over a decade, and he'll have to see for himself whether Adrian is truly worthy to be followed, as Billiam says. But then, the line on Billiam's call got disconnected, making Billiam awkwardly laugh and shyly check his connection, wondering why Adrian isn't picking up the call. Then, they felt a strong power of mana, and Perseus noticed that it was unmistakably a mana signature of space leaps. Moreover, with that amount of mana, he was certain that it was a teleportation of the 7th circle. When he was about to ask what on earth was going on, Adrian, with Arsha, appeared, and he told them that judging by their faces, they mustn't have an idea that they were under siege. Billiam looked confused at him, but he just told them that he does understand because they are people covered with artifacts throughout their entire bodies. Then, he ordered Arsha to get rid of them, which Arsha speedily obeyed. Then, she came back with a bloody sword and told Adrian that 5 assassins have been defeated. But he just asked if his expectations were too big because he heard that both of them are the strongest men in their territory, but to think they didn't even notice the assassins' approach. Billiam wonders what in the world is the situation and who is that monster with the laid-back expression beside Adrian. When he was about to ask Adrian, he cut him off by saying that he has been dreaming of revenge for 13 years since the day he took the poison and asked them if they would come unprepared. He also told them that he needs to at least have an aura master as a guard, making them both shocked. Perseus remembered his words that he'll have to see for himself whether Adrian is truly worthy to be followed and realized that he has been acting too presumptuous because that person isn't someone he can dare to figure out. They silently gazed at each other for a moment. Then he turned his attention to Perseus and noticed that Perseus was 43 years old. He was a member of Reinhardt Kingdom's Free Knights. His talents included a high aura, strong physical abilities, moderate learning aptitude, and average intelligence. His traits were marked by conquest and leadership. Their relationship was friendly and allied, and his demeanor appeared astonished, scared, and anticipative. Perseus inquired if Anna had sent them, to which he replied affirmatively. While telling Perseus that he must have many questions, he snapped his fingers, and immediately the corpses on the ground vanished, and the damaged surroundings were magically repaired. Billiam was amazed to see the bloodstains and corpses disappear but assured them not to dwell on it, explaining that it was merely a 5th circle magic spell. He then suggested they relocate, and with a touch of teleportation magic, he swiftly transported them, leaving them in awe as this was a 7th circle spell known as teleport. Lua's kingdom was an ally of Reinhardt Kingdom, known for having a significant number of grand wizards, following the 4 empires. If anyone were to name the most famous wizard among them, the unanimous answer would be Duke Kine Riverdale. He was not only a grand wizard but also a renowned teacher who successfully trained 6 7th circle wizards. However, many believed that the greatest wizard of all time was Archduke Lucas, while the title of the greatest teacher belonged to Duke Kine Riverdale. Perseus asked if his magic teacher was truly Duke Riverdale. However, he was told that Riverdale had passed away a year ago. He replied that he knew, but because Riverdale had taught him, he could learn without any problem under Anna's guidance. Perseus still couldn't believe it, knowing that he had spent most of his time in the game. Then Perseus figured something out, making Adrian smile, and he told him that he was right. He explained that the only place he could act without any restriction was the virtual world. Riverdale taught him in both the real world and the virtual world taking turns. However, he knew it was all a lie because the Grand Wizard appeared out of nowhere. Anyone would doubt if a 20-year-old reached the 7th circle. The best way to prevent that from happening is by having the title of Duke Riverdale's disciple. Perseus told him that Riverdale was indeed creative, and it was a brilliant way to teach. He knew that he didn't just lie without any preparation. He had a platinum plaque and a hologram picture of Riverdale and him. But none of those were real. He asked Lucky Encounter admin Chester to create them in reality to use them as his alibi. Just like the one he was holding, there were many traces of Riverdale and a record of him having a secret disciple that no one knew about. So, the Riverdale family or his other disciples would trust him when they find him. He wished he could say he was the heir of Archduke Lucas, but he knew that people wouldn't leave him alone for the rest of his life. Then he told them that Arsha and he could handle Anna and Cedric, so there was no need to try too hard to expand their influence. Perseus asked him why he had called him there. He replied that he had no plan of letting him go, making Perseus shocked and confused. Then he told Perseus that he had something else to do for him and asked him if he could see his left hand. Their digital watches touched each other. Then the system showed the number 2 online currency account, and the system asked him if he would like to share his 20 billion loots in the number 2 online currency account, to which he replied yes. Perseus was shocked by his action, but he just told him that he wanted him to create a group that would obey his orders and gather the intel. He knows that the jobs that group is going to do will be dirty work, but it is required to aim higher, and it was cruel to ask a knight to take the job. Perseus told him that since they were likely to go against Margrave Raven, he believed they did need a group like it, but asked him if he was sure because he believed it wasn't easy for him to save up that amount of money. He told Perseus that he has a talent for investing and that 20 billion is a lot but not enough to worry about, making Perseus react that it was amazing. But he just stood up, knowing that Perseus would faint if he mentioned that he had 3,000 times the amount of money he just showed him. Then he offers his hand to Perseus and tells him that he is going to push Cedric off his spot and inherit the family, then have the power that no one can disrespect in that nation, and asks Perseus if he is with him. Perseus looked up at him and bowed down, accepting his hand while telling him that he had his loyalty. Meanwhile, in Anna's room, she asks her butler if he means 5 expert assassins who disappeared without any traces, to which the butler fearfully replies yes. She asks him if they didn't say they can kill anyone except an aura master or grand wizard, to which the man replies yes because their ability is capable. She throws her wine glass at the man's head and furiously asks why it is happening, but the man just bends his head down. She asks him where Perseus and Billiam are, and the man replies that Billiam returned to his unit, and Perseus' location is unknown. She tells the bleeding man that Perseus is alive because Billiam would report to her husband if Perseus died, and thinks that if those two are together and planning something, they are definitely aiming for her, so she should have watched over the situation a little more. Then she remembers Rayford telling her that he would like her to stop watching over Adrian and Sylvia, making him pissed, knowing that she had no choice but to listen to Rayford because if she pushed too hard on Rayford, things could have gotten worse. But she was pissed to hear a report that Adrian's performance is beyond expectation. Adrian is sharing his reward with his comrades and superiors, but Adrian will be getting a title when the war is over, and Billiam said he wants to be on Adrian's side. But Adrian declined Billiam's offer. Also, there were more knights who wanted to support Adrian, making her think that if Billiam and Perseus get together, they will be unstoppable, so she can't let them do what they want. Also, she can't allow Cedric to have a competitor, so there's no time to keep promises anymore. The man asks her what she would like to do with the Assassin Guild and tells her that they promised to send more people to ensure they complete the job. She simply asks the man if she should just kill Adrian, which shocks him. She asks the man why they were so scared when it seemed like the easiest solution, so she didn't need to think too hard. But the man warned her that if she did it, there was no turning back with Rayford, and Adrian was gaining everyone's attention. However, she interrupted him by calling him and asked him how long he had worked for her. The man replied that this year would be his 30th year, while she grabbed a bottle of wine. She walked toward him, telling him that if he had worked for her that long, he should know she hated being lectured. The man fearfully apologized to her. She poured the wine on the man's head and asked if he thought she didn't know that. She told him she was doing it because there was no other way, making the man shake in fear, knowing he had made a mistake. She asked the man if he thought he was smarter than her, and he shakily said that he kept going because of remorse for Adrian. He kneeled on his knees and begged her to forgive him because he just pitied Adrian. She asked him if he said pity, and he replied yes, nothing else. She smiled and told him that if that was the case, he could frame it differently, making him confused. But when she told him it wasn't an ordinary person dying, it was the pitiful son of a viscount, someone had to take responsibility, and he did it as his way of showing loyalty without her knowing, crushing his world. Then she sweetly asked him why and if he didn't want to. The man, shakingly, replied that he understood, and she should leave it to him because he'd prove his loyalty. She laughed and told him she liked his response, then walked away, telling him to get it done this time, and if they failed again, they would be the ones dying. The man realized that Anna was letting him go after working for her for 30 years because he misspoke, and he thought it was too late to go back. If Adrian could overcome it, maybe he could find a way out. Meanwhile, they raised a glass of wine together and Otis was proudly talking with him, while Anna's butler thought there was no way he could find a way out. The people cheered, raising their glasses while congratulating the victory of the 23rd Division. One of the men told them that they could finally go back, and the other replied that he was relieved that the end of the war had been declared safely. Otis told everyone that he never thought he would receive recognition thanks to Adrian, and that he was looking forward to the commendation ceremony. One of the men happily replied that Otis was right and thanked Adrian because his standing in his family had risen. The other men assured him that he would be the heir of his family, so he should visit them anytime because they would welcome him with open arms. He knows that they are getting credit for what he has done, so it is normal, and he thinks that if he had taken all the rewards himself, it wouldn't have happened. Then he told everyone that it was all because Otis had trusted and supported him with great wisdom, making Otis laugh and telling him that he was a humble man. But then Otis told him that it could have been better for him if the war had continued for a little longer, making him wonder what he meant. Then Otis told him that if the war had continued and he had earned more recognition, he could have become a lord. But with what he has right now, the reward will be limited to only him. Hearing this, he understood what Otis meant because he knows that there is a big difference between inheriting a title and earning one on his own. No matter how high of a rank he achieves, he doesn't have earldom, and he can't pass on his title. He told Otis that it was okay and that he didn't fight expecting something. Still, Otis told him that it was a shame because he has so much potential, but he doesn't have the environment to fully express himself. He just keeps silent, knowing that he'll be the rightful heir of his family once he pushes Cedric away. Otis told him that it makes him feel sorry, and he told Otis that he shouldn't worry about it because it was really okay for him. Then Otis cleared his throat and told him that maybe he could get engaged to his daughter, making him shocked. Otis shyly told him that he had one daughter, and if he would like, he could make it happen. This made him wonder why all of a sudden, and he thought it was a little too much. So, he thanked Otis for the offer and told him that he'll think about it. Otis excitedly told him to think about it and that he'll always welcome him. He wondered if Otis's daughter was the one known for being a maniac, but he thought it was not his problem anyway and wondered if it mattered when he could finally go back. Then he told Anna and Cedric in his mind that when he gets back, things they would have never expected would happen. The day after Reinhardt's and Croissant's war ended, the provincial army was disbanded right away. Evans shook his hand and invited him to visit his place anytime since he was always welcome. After a brief farewell, the ship closed and began flying in mid-air. Later, he logged into the game and felt exhausted. He was leveling up rapidly in the game whenever he had some free time. He knew that the level requirement to challenge the Lucky Encounter quest level 8 was 250, and his current level was 202. However, it had been almost 10 days since he reached level 200, and he felt like he hadn't been making progress at all. He thought their combat abilities had improved significantly since the battle against the Death Knight. As they became stronger, the monsters also grew stronger. The experience point cap had gone up as well, making it impossible to level up at least once a day like before. He knew it wasn't just his problem because the party that had just slain that monster also needed at least a party of 5. This made him wonder if he should look for a new party member, but he thought he couldn't do it. It was best to avoid attention since he had the Lucky Encounter ability, and he preferred to progress slowly and steadily toward reaching the max level. So, he planned to take it as a lesson and a valuable experience. When he was about to say something to Arsha, he noticed that she wasn't moving, prompting him to ask her what was wrong. Then Crowy landed behind him. He asked Crowy what was happening, and it tried to explain something while flapping its wings. He looked back at Arsha in a panic, wondering if something had happened outside. He immediately logged out and saw Arsha fighting with someone, which surprised him. He closely observed her fighting and realized that it was a battle. He quickly used his great shield to protect himself and stood by Arsha's side. She told him that they were assassins, similar to the ones they got rid of last time. He asked since when assassins use force swords, and she replied that she was not sure about it, but they are armed with force armor and swords, with a total of 3. He walked closer to her while telling her that it was too clean there considering there were 3 vanguards trying to kill him. She told him that Billiam was ready for any attacks and that Billiam stalled, and their vanguards were now dealing with them. He was relieved that they had 5 vanguards, so it shouldn't be too hard. But then, Arsha looked up while telling him that, however, she didn't think that one would be so easy while the ceiling of the room was collapsing. Then they saw red eyes staring at them, and he noticed that they were armored golems. He guessed Anna changed her target to him from Billiam and Pesius, but he honestly preferred it too. Then he grabbed something from his inventory space while calling Arsha and threw a sword at her, asking her if one force sword should be enough for her, to which she replied, of course. Then he grabbed his Istro staff while Arsha held her Istro arming sword.